A simple woman walked into Brooklyn Trust and Capital that morning, carrying nothing more than a check and quiet dignity. Isabella Miller wore a plain gray sweatshirt, worn sneakers, and a faded canvas bag slung over one shoulder. Inside, marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Men in custom suits and women in designer heels whispered over leather portfolios. Every polished surface reflected a world she did not belong to. Isabella smiled politely at the front desk. "I would like to make a deposit and ask about a loan," she said, voice calm. The receptionist's eyes flickered over her, then narrowed. Without a word, he pointed her toward a line far from the premium clients. Minutes later, a customer service officer in a sharp navy suit greeted her with a smirk. "Ma'am, this bank serves high-net-worth individuals," she said. "Perhaps you are looking for another institution." Around them, heads turned. A few chuckles echoed softly through the lobby. Isabella stood her ground, refusing to be embarrassed. But security was already approaching. "Ma'am, please leave the premises," the guard said, low but firm. Isabella glanced around. No one spoke for her. No one stopped it. She stepped back onto the sidewalk, the heavy glass doors clicking shut behind her, humiliated but unbroken. What the bank staff did not know was that the simple woman they dismissed would soon teach them a lesson they would never forget. Isabella Miller did not own many expensive clothes despite the fortune she could easily access. She preferred comfort over labels, purpose over appearance. At 39, Isabella carried herself with a kind of quiet grace, the kind that came not from designer shoes or sparkling jewelry, but from a life lived with intention. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, a few stray wisps brushing her cheeks. Her jeans were soft from years of wear, her sneakers scuffed but sturdy. Her favorite handbag, a faded canvas tote, sat by the door, already packed with nothing but essentials. In the kitchen, morning light filtered through sheer curtains. A small vase of fresh wildflowers sat on the counter next to a stack of mail and an old cookbook with handwritten notes tucked into the margins. This was the world Isabella had chosen even after marrying Jonathan Miller, a man who had built one of the most respected private equity firms in the country. 15 years earlier, Isabella had been an art teacher in a public school just outside Boston. She had loved the work, the way children's imaginations exploded across canvas and paper. She remembered the way her heart had soared when a shy student found their voice through color. But when Jonathan's career began to take off, the balance shifted. They both agreed she would step back, not because he demanded it, but because she wanted to help build the foundation of something greater for their future family. Even after wealth poured into their lives, Isabella refused to trade in her values for luxury. She still volunteered at the community arts center. She still drove her 10-year-old car. She still believed that worth was measured not by the cut of a jacket, but by the kindness in someone's voice. Today she stood in front of a modest mirror near the front door, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She studied her reflection, adjusting her old sweatshirt. There was nothing remarkable about the woman staring back at her. And that was exactly the point. Jonathan appeared in the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt. "You sure you want to go through with this?" he asked, half smiling but with a note of concern. Isabella smiled back, a soft warmth lighting her features. "Someone needs to. If we really want to understand the problem, we have to see it through the eyes of the people being judged." Jonathan leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. "You always did see what others missed." She picked up her bag and her car keys, her resolve quiet but unwavering. Today, Isabella would not be the wife of a CEO. Today, she would be just another woman standing in a place that claimed to value people and seeing if it lived up to its promises. With one last glance around the simple sunlit room that was her sanctuary, Isabella stepped outside into the brisk morning air, ready to walk straight into a world that often mistook simplicity for insignificance. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The moment Isabella Miller stepped through the glass doors of Brooklyn Trust and Capital, the world seemed to sharpen around her. The floor beneath her feet was a perfect sheet of marble, its surface gleaming like a frozen lake. Above her, crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the vaulted ceilings, bouncing off polished chrome and dark wood panels. Everything in the lobby whispered wealth and exclusivity. The reception desks were not simply desks. They were handcrafted walnut stations staffed by men and women in perfectly pressed designer suits. Their smiles were professional but distant, their hands quick and practiced as they handled the transactions of the elite. Isabella adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag and moved forward, the soft tread of her sneakers sounding foreign against the polished floor. Around her, the other patrons were wrapped in luxury Italian leather shoes, silk scarves, gleaming watches. Quiet conversations floated through the air, filled with the language of mergers, real estate investments, and art auctions. The scent of expensive cologne and fresh-cut orchids filled the lobby. A soft instrumental symphony played from hidden speakers, soothing but calculated, the kind of sound designed to assure the wealthy they were exactly where they belonged. Isabella's simple gray sweatshirt and faded jeans made her stand out in subtle but unmistakable ways. Glances were quick but cutting. A receptionist paused, blinking twice before recovering her polished smile. A suited man by the concierge desk gave a brief dismissive scan from head to toe before returning to his phone call. In this space, exclusion was not loud. It lived in the slight tilt of a chin, the careful distance people placed between themselves and someone who looked ordinary. Isabella moved forward steady, despite the growing awareness of how out of place she seemed. She clutched the check in her hand a little tighter, the paper crinkling slightly under her fingers. She had a job to do, and she would not be distracted by the cold elegance pressing down on her. Ahead, the reception desk waited, manned by a young man in a flawless navy suit. Isabella took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and approached, stepping fully into the heart of a place that valued appearances above all else. The young man at the reception desk barely looked up as Isabella approached. His name tag read, Bryce, and his navy suit looked fresh from a designer catalog. When he finally met her eyes, there was a moment's pause. A silent calculation. "Good morning," Isabella said, offering a polite smile. "I would like to make a deposit and speak to someone about loan options." Bryce's answering smile was tight-strained at the corners. "Of course," he said. "May I have your account information?" Isabella handed over her ID and a check folded neatly inside a plain envelope. Bryce accepted it with the kind of caution usually reserved for something sticky or dangerous. He typed her name into the system, his fingers hesitating slightly over the keyboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said after a beat. "I don't see an active profile here with us." "I just opened a small business account online last month," Isabella explained calmly. "It should be listed under Isabella Miller." Bryce frowned, double-checking the spelling. Perhaps there was an error. He said his tone was polite, but his eyes had already shifted, more guarded now, more skeptical. "You'll need to speak to one of our client service officers." He gestured toward a polished glass office across the lobby where a woman in a sharply tailored navy dress sat reviewing papers. "Ms. Monroe can assist you," he said, stepping back with visible relief. Isabella made her way toward the office, feeling the weight of eyes following her. Inside, Alicia Monroe did not immediately look up when Isabella entered. Instead, she finished tapping a few notes into her sleek tablet before raising her head. Her expression professional but chilly. "Yes," Alicia said, eyebrows lifted. "I would like to make a deposit and discuss a loan option," Isabella said, keeping her voice even. Alicia's gaze dropped to Isabella's sweatshirt, her worn jeans, her canvas bag. There was a beat of silence just long enough to sting. "Do you have an appointment?" Alicia asked, voice clipped. "No," Isabella replied. "I was told I could speak with a representative." Alicia leaned back in her chair, the movement deliberate, calculating. "Typically, we schedule consultations for serious clients," she said, the faintest stress on the word serious. Isabella placed the check carefully on the desk, sliding it forward without a word. Alicia glanced at it, her eyebrows arching higher. $5,000, she said aloud, loud enough for the nearby receptionist to glance over. She gave a small, almost imperceptible smirk. "We usually recommend our community branch for deposits of this size," Alicia continued. Her tone was professional on the surface, but the message underneath was clear. Isabella straightened her shoulders. "This is the correct branch for my account," she said quietly, firm. Alicia gave a tight, brittle smile. "Of course," she said. "But given your current profile and deposit amount, we would have to hold the funds for an extended period, perhaps 15 business days, for verification." Isabella knew that was absurd. Standard policy for an account with verified identification was no more than 2 days. "That seems excessive," she said. "Our standards are very high," Alicia replied smoothly. "And frankly, given your situation." She let the words trail off, her gaze once again sweeping pointedly over Isabella's clothes. "It may be better for you to seek services elsewhere." The humiliation was quiet, but it was surgical. Each word sliced clean and deep. "I would like to speak to a branch manager," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the heat rising to her cheeks. Alicia's smile thinned further. "I'm afraid Mr. Collins is unavailable," she said. Her hand moved slightly, almost a dismissive wave. And truly there is little point. Brooklyn Trust maintains very selective relationships. Isabella remained standing, refusing to be dismissed so easily. Alicia's tone hardened, shifting from polite rejection to open disdain. "Let's be honest," she said, voice dropping just low enough to be sharp. "This is not the kind of environment for casual walk-ins in sweatshirts. We pride ourselves on maintaining a certain level of professionalism." The words hung heavy between them. Nearby, a suited man glanced over his newspaper, catching every word. A young woman at the concierge desk tapped on her phone, barely hiding her smirk. Isabella gathered the check and her ID, slowly, her hands steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Thank you for your time," she said, turning to leave. But Alicia was not finished. "Security," she called lightly, waving toward the entrance. "This guest will be exiting." The guard, a man about her age with tired eyes, stepped forward, hesitating. Isabella looked up at him, meeting his gaze fully. There was a flicker of sympathy there, but also a weariness that told her he had seen this happen before. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'll need you to step outside." Isabella nodded once, chin high, and walked past Alicia without another word. The lobby felt even colder now, the marble beneath her shoes harder. She felt every pair of eyes on her, each look a silent echo of Alicia's words. "Casual walk-ins, not our kind, not welcome." The heavy glass doors closed behind her, sealing her outside like she had never belonged there at all. But Isabella Miller had not come looking for belonging. She had come seeking the truth. And what she had found would soon tear the bank's polished reputation apart. The silence inside the car wrapped around Isabella like a heavy blanket. She sat behind the steering wheel, hands resting loosely in her lap, the check still folded neatly beside her. Outside, the marble facade of Brooklyn Trust and Capital gleamed under the noon sun. It looked untouched, perfect, as if nothing inside those walls could ever be wrong. Isabella leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes for a moment. The air felt thicker here, weighted with all the words that had not been said out loud, but had been spoken clearly enough in the glances, the smirks, the dismissals. She had been through moments like this before. The first time she walked into a university admissions office with a scholarship letter, but no expensive last name. The first time she attended a gala with Jonathan and realized the smiles toward her ended just above her shoes. Still, something about today stung deeper. It was not just about her. It was about every person who had been told in 100 silent ways that they were less important, less worthy, less human. Isabella opened her eyes slowly. A small crack ran through the windshield's edge, a tiny imperfection she had been meaning to fix for weeks. Somehow it fit today. Her fingers found her phone, hesitating for a long moment before unlocking the screen. Jonathan would be in a meeting by now, likely reviewing investment portfolios or acquisition contracts. She hated to interrupt, hated even more to sound emotional. But this was bigger than pride. Taking a slow breath, she tapped his contact and held the phone to her ear. It rang twice before he answered. "Isabella," his voice was warm, grounding. She swallowed hard, willing her voice not to shake. "I just left the bank," she said quietly. Jonathan paused, sensing the weight behind her words. "And?" There was no rush in his tone, no demand, just open space ready to receive whatever she needed to say. "They asked me to leave," Isabella said. A small, sad laugh slipped out before she could stop it. Apparently sweatshirts are not part of their approved dress code. Jonathan was silent for a beat. When he spoke again, his voice was low, controlled. "Tell me everything." Isabella stared out at the street beyond the windshield. Pedestrians hurried by, wrapped in their own worlds, never guessing the battles playing out behind closed doors. She began to recount what had happened. The looks, the dismissive words, the final insult served with polished smiles. As she spoke, a strange thing happened. The sadness, the sting of humiliation began to lift. In its place grew something steadier, stronger. She was not here to seek their approval. She was here to reveal their truth. When she finished, Jonathan said only one thing. "I am on my way." Isabella ended the call and set the phone down gently. She sat there for another minute, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat steady against the quiet hum of the city. They had underestimated her. They had judged her by the threadbare cuffs of her sweatshirt and the scuffs on her shoes. But true strength had never worn designer labels. It had always lived in the quiet choice to stand tall even when the world insisted you bow. Isabella started the engine. The car rumbled to life, an old familiar sound. She smiled softly to herself. This story was not over yet. Not by a long shot. The black sedan pulled up to the curb outside Brooklyn Trust and Capital with a quiet authority that turned a few heads. The driver stepped out first, moving swiftly to open the passenger door. Jonathan Miller emerged, adjusting the cuffs of his crisp white shirt beneath an impeccably tailored navy suit. His shoes gleamed under the late morning sun. His presence alone seemed to shift the air, drawing attention from passers-by and customers alike. He paused on the sidewalk, scanning the grand entrance, then started forward with measured steps. Behind the polished glass, staff members caught sight of him. One receptionist straightened instinctively. A senior associate near the concierge desk nudged a colleague, murmuring under her breath. Jonathan was not just another wealthy client, he was the majority owner. And today he had come not to negotiate, but to expose. Inside the lobby, the murmur of conversation quieted as Jonathan walked past the reception desk without pause. Bryce, still seated at the front counter, fumbled with his tablet, his face paling as he recognized who had just entered. Jonathan's gaze was steady, unwavering as he moved across the marble floor. He spotted Isabella standing discreetly near the entrance, her posture calm, but her eyes burning with the memory of what had happened. He offered her the briefest nod, a silent reassurance he had heard her story. Now he would finish it. The branch manager, Robert Collins, hurried out from a glass-walled office, his face a carefully arranged mask of professionalism. "Mr. Miller," Collins said, extending a hand, "what a pleasure. I was not informed you would be visiting us today." Jonathan did not take the offered hand. Instead, his voice, low but commanding, carried across the marble lobby. "Spare me the performance," he said. "I am here because my wife was publicly humiliated by your staff less than an hour ago." The blood drained from Collins's face as he glanced toward Alicia Monroe, who had just stepped out of her office, tablet still in hand. Alicia froze when she saw Isabella standing beside Jonathan. Then her eyes traveled to Jonathan's face, and realization hit like a slap. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Jonathan turned to address the room, ensuring every employee and customer could hear him. "My wife came here today dressed as herself, not as the spouse of a financial executive, not as a woman of wealth, but as a customer. One of many you claim to serve with dignity and respect." A murmur rippled through the lobby. "And how was she treated?" Jonathan continued, voice firm. "She was dismissed, judged by her appearance, mocked in public view, refused basic services, not because of her credentials, but because of the clothes she wore." He let the words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Alicia stepped forward, trying to recover her composure. "Mr. Miller, I assure you there must have been some misunderstanding. We follow strict procedures." Jonathan turned to her, his voice cutting through her words. "The only misunderstanding," he said coldly, "was yours. You misunderstood what kind of institution this is supposed to be. You misunderstood the meaning of service. You misunderstood the value of human dignity." Alicia's face flushed deep red. She clutched her tablet tighter but said nothing more. Jonathan faced the employees directly now. "Let me make this very clear," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "From this day forward, Brooklyn Trust and Capital will not judge customers by the brands they wear or the cars they drive. Respect will no longer be reserved for those you deem worthy. It will be given freely to everyone." Silence gripped the room. Customers stared openly now. Some nodded, their expressions tight with approval. Others shifted, uncomfortably exposed in their quiet complicity. Jonathan turned back to Collins. "Effective immediately, a full review of hiring, training, and service practices will commence. And as for Ms. Monroe," he looked Alicia directly in the eye, "you are suspended pending a formal investigation. HR will be contacting you." Alicia swallowed hard but remained silent. There were no arguments left to make. Jonathan extended his hand to Isabella, who stepped forward with quiet strength. He laced his fingers through hers. "You deserved better," he said, not just to her but to the room. "Everyone does." Together they turned toward the door. As they walked past the stunned staff and silent customers, Jonathan paused at the security desk. He looked at the guard who had escorted Isabella out earlier. The man shifted nervously, but Jonathan offered him a nod of respect. "Thank you," Jonathan said simply. Outside, the sun felt warmer, the street noisier, more alive. Jonathan opened the car door for Isabella, guiding her in with the same quiet care he had shown her every day of their marriage. Inside the sedan, Isabella let out a long breath she had not realized she was holding. Jonathan smiled at her, a soft fierceness in his eyes. "They thought they could judge you," he said. "They had no idea who they were dealing with." Isabella smiled back, not with triumph, but with the calm satisfaction of someone who had held the truth in her hands all along. The bank's doors swung shut behind them, but the impact of what had happened inside would echo for a long time to come. 1 month later, Isabella Miller pushed open the glass doors of Brooklyn Trust and Capital once again. But this time, the air inside felt different. The marble floors still gleamed and the chandeliers still caught the sunlight in 1,000 brilliant sparks. But there was something new here now. Something unseen, but deeply felt. Gone was the cold formality that had once wrapped around the lobby like a barrier. In its place was a sense of welcome, subtle but undeniable. The reception desks had been restructured lower and more open, inviting conversation rather than silent transactions. Staff members no longer wore rigid, colorless uniforms. Instead, tasteful variations allowed personality to shine through. The faces behind the counters smiled with genuine warmth, not polished obligation. Jonathan walked beside Isabella, their steps measured but easy. He squeezed her hand once, a silent question. She answered with a soft smile. They had built something better here. Near the entrance, a familiar face approached. It was Marcus, the security guard who had been asked to escort Isabella out on that humiliating day. But now his Navy uniform bore a new nameplate. Marcus Wilson, Customer Experience Manager. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," he said warmly, "welcome back. It is good to see you." Isabella smiled, her heart lifting. "Congratulations, Marcus." Jonathan said, his voice full of quiet pride. "Thank you, sir." Marcus replied, his posture straight but relaxed. "A lot has changed, thanks to both of you." They chatted for a moment about the new customer service programs, the community outreach initiatives, the renewed focus on dignity over displays of wealth. Marcus spoke with a light in his eyes that had not been there before. As they moved deeper into the lobby, Isabella noticed small but telling scenes. An elderly woman with a worn handbag being offered a chair and a coffee while she waited. A young couple dressed in plain clothes being greeted with the same enthusiasm as a man in an expensive suit. It was not perfect yet. Real change never was immediate, but the seeds had been planted and they were beginning to grow. Isabella paused near a newly installed plaque by the entrance. Etched into the brushed steel were simple words. "Every person deserves respect. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every customer deserves dignity." She traced the words lightly with her fingertips, feeling the truth settle into her bones. For a long time, institutions like this had built walls. Walls made of marble and glass, but also of assumptions, judgments, and silent exclusions. Tearing them down would take more than one speech, more than one moment of outrage. It would take constant, steady choice. Choice to see beyond the labels. Choice to honor the unseen worth in every stranger who crossed the threshold. Jonathan joined her by the plaque, slipping his arm around her shoulders. Together they stood for a moment in the quiet, watching a new chapter unfold. Outside, the city bustled with its usual rhythm, busy, noisy, hurried. But inside this space, a small but mighty revolution had begun. Not a revolution of banners or protests, but of kindness, of respect. Of the simple, radical belief that no one is ever too small to matter. Isabella smiled softly, leaning into Jonathan's side. Sometimes change began not with the powerful demanding more, but with the quiet standing firm. Sometimes the strongest voice was the one that refused to shout, the one that simply stayed standing, even when others looked away. And sometimes the greatest victories came not from winning a battle, but from planting something better where injustice had once stood. As they stepped back into the sunlight, Isabella carried the warmth of that truth with her, a truth she would never let the world forget. A simple woman walked into a prestigious bank only to be humiliated for the clothes she wore. But what the world saw as ordinary life revealed as extraordinary. Isabella's quiet resilience shattered the illusion that worth could be measured by fabric or fortune. Her strength was not stitched into designer labels. It was woven into every choice she made to stand with dignity, even when dignity was denied. Today the marble floors still shine, the chandeliers still sparkle, but the heart of the place has changed forever. Not because someone demanded respect with a title or a balance sheet, but because a simple woman proved that true value lives in how we treat others when no one is watching. How many times have we misjudged someone based on their appearance alone? How different could our world be if we chose to see with compassion instead of comparison? If this story moved you, we invite you to subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal the true meaning of worth. Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your experiences and reflections.